Ass titties. Hello, trick theorists! Welcome back to Talkin' Tricks. My name's Frank.
I'm Jason.
And yeah, so last time we talked about what makes a trick a trick, and now we're going to talk about one of the aspects that makes a trick a trick. And what is that, Jason?
That's landing stances. Today we're going to be going over the 4 available landing stances you have to add on to any of your base tricks.
Mm-hmm.
If you recall, last time we kind of classified landing stance as a modifier to tricks because it can be done in addition to the base, like, complete.
Yeah.
So...
Yeah. So some of them are, like, understood. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, if you cork, I'm, like, understanding that you did complete cork. You know what I mean? You don't have to say, oh, I did complete cork, or whatever the fuck. Similar with hyperhook. Hyperhook is not a landing stance. It's a variation. But I understand that you've done a hyper landing, unless you give some modification to it, like you did semi-hyper hook. You know what I mean?
Well, and there's actually some times where we will want to differentiate, not just between different landing stances, but between aspects of individual landing stances themselves. And that's something we'll touch on later on in the episode. So,
cool.
Yeah.
So, I guess any discussion about landing stances is kind of incomplete without talking about Dom. And so Dom, basically the way it's direction and momentum, and there's kind of like a leeway to it with Dom, because I know you consider Dom to be like, let's say you're doing a backflip, your Dom is behind you, right? Mm-hmm. Exactly. So, and that's, you consider it to be in line with the target,
right,
and stuff.
Well, ideally.
Yeah, ideally. I can see that, and like I think there's a leeway to it, and I consider the target to be like maybe that and 90 degrees.
No, and I agree with that as well. I've come to, when we were first talking about this, I was kind of, I don't know, but when it comes down, it's like we were talking about earlier.
There's a leeway.
Yeah, and it's a line of practicality versus theoretical.
Yeah, exactly. And so, just to clarify exactly what we're talking about, when most people talk about target, you might think of American sidestep, and you might think, okay, when you're doing a tornado, let's say your Dom is basically to the left of where you're kicking, right?
For left twisters.
Yeah, sorry, for left twisters. So you're kicking like in front of you basically while your Dom is traveling to the left, and so that's kind of the misalignment with that. But I think there's some leeway that allows the target to also be aligned with a Dom. For example, if you do like a K-step, kick or whatever.
Yeah, generally a more forward type of kick as opposed to the side. Your target is kind of in front of you, and you take off, with your back facing it, so you can kind of wrap.
Yeah.
And I think that basically all round kicks kind of fall into this 90-degree window anyway. Mm-hmm. They're either like at the extreme, it's like on target with your round, and like your hips are kind of facing in that other direction.
Yeah.
But like oftentimes I think it falls short of that, and somewhere in between that that perpendicular point and that aligned with the Dom.
Yeah, exactly. So like I said, I know the visual medium isn't super conducive to this, but just picture doing a cork. When you're initiating that cork, your DOM is essentially behind you, and like you just follow like what your gut feeling says about what the DOM is. Like if you're doing an A-twist, your DOM's in front of you. If you're doing a rise, your DOM's in front of you. If you're doing a wrap full, your DOM's to the left of you. If you're doing a lotus, your DOM's to the right of you. Like this is essentially what we mean, is like this is the direction your momentum is going. And it can be static or it can be dynamic. Like, within a combo, maybe you're doing one that's like fucking flawless and you're only going in one direction, and like somehow you have super control of that, then yeah, your DOM is pretty much in the same direction. But more often than not, your DOM is going to be switching as you keep doing tricks.
Yeah.
And it switches as you do the tricks, right?
And I think a lot of it has to do with like the window, because you won't land at that perfect perpendicular or aligned point. You'll land somewhere in between, and like this only slightly alters your Dom, but then like you do another trick that only slightly alters your Dom, and now you're going like in the opposite direction you came from in your combo, but it was just a natural progression of how you've landed the tricks and built up to that.
And that's completely fine. Nothing about that makes it imperfect. It's just kind of how tricks happen.
It's a more an observation than it is a critique.
Yeah. But so the reason why we're bringing up Dom so much is because when we talk about the compass in which your landing stances happen, we're talking in relation to your Dom, okay? So that essentially landing stance only happens in relation to your Dom in essence. And what I mean by that is like we're gonna talk about numbers. We're gonna say 0 to 90 degrees, 90 to 180 degrees, and when we say that, our 0 degree point is facing away from your Dom, right? So you landed a cork. You're facing away from your Dom, you're at 0 degrees of rotation, okay? So, and that's essentially what we mean. So when we say 90 degrees, just picture the left a little bit, 90 degrees.
Yeah,
your dark
an additional right 90 degree like rotation to your base landing
exactly
of the trick.
Exactly.
So if you were to do, for example, land 90 degrees on a full, you would be in the ideal hyper position, essentially.
And this sounds kind of elementary, probably to a lot of trickers that are pretty seasoned and shit like that. I've heard of, or have you even heard of Trick Theory? He made like really great posts about this, and a lot of the shit we're talking about is based off of what he made and shit like that. So yeah, shout out to Brian Skinner.
An extension of that, at least how we understood it and interpreted it.
Yeah, because he did a good job of embracing what trickers thought lead landing stances were and stuff like that. So
yeah, and we kind of try to keep that going too with not introducing too many obscure weird things. We try to work within the terminologies, like given understanding and limits and
exactly. So basically, landing stance is how you finish a move. Okay, so the 4 of them, without going to too much detail, from order of like 0 to 270 degrees, basically, it would be complete. For 90 degrees, you have hyper, you have mega, and then you have semi, right? So that's basically the 4 that we're going to be covering, and we're going to explain them obviously more in depth as we go on. But they cover 90 degrees each, which makes the full circle. It makes the 360 degrees
right.
and shit
so
like that.
And essentially, you start at complete. You can work up to like hyper to mega to semi, and then eventually you end up back at complete, where you've done a full rotation variation at that point, right? You've added a twist to your trick, landing back incomplete if you were to, do the whole 360.
Yeah. And those of you that like fake landing stances, we will get to you. Don't worry.
Yeah, we have a rebuttal for fake landing stances, and they're,
yeah, that kind of shit. Fuck them.
They're not really necessary.
But no, we'll get to it. We'll explain exactly what it means and then what our kind of thoughts are on it, when we get to it. So yeah, basically the relative to Dom, there's 90 degrees for each. And we'll also hit on like what it means to land on 2 feet, because that's also slightly different. Everything that we're going to be talking about is like quote unquote like optimally landing on 1 foot. You know what I mean? So,
right. Assuming, and we'll describe the feet that you land on for each landing stance, but each landing stance typically has only 1 foot that it refers to.
Yes.
As the landing, depending on which direction you trick. Obviously, if you twist to the right, it'll be the opposite foot than we described, because we are assuming left. But
yeah,
essentially it's typically assumed to only have one-legged landing. And I guess that brings us to the first landing stance, and we're actually going to skip over complete, because complete is more difficult to...
It's weirder than you expect.
It's more nuanced than a lot of the other ones. So we'll skip over that, and we'll start with probably the most easily understood one, which is hyper. And hyper is a right leg landing for left twisters, where you can land in this 90-degree window starting from 0 to 90 degrees. So it's got, you would land on just your right leg. And essentially, like, the difference, like, we gave it that window, and, like, to picture, I guess, something that lands at, like, the 0 degree mark of hyper would be, like a newbie's first hyper full.
Yeah.
Right? Where they only land, like, they do the full rotation. It's only 360 degrees, quote unquote, of rotation, but they land on just the right leg, and that's like,
oh my god, I just landed my first hyper.
Like, yeah, exactly.
And that's not to discount it. Like, that's a true fucking hyper.
Yeah, we recognize that as a hyper, as it is, but it's still like, I mean, it's more incidental than it is purposeful or intentional.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Right, and like where the typical intentional hyper landing is at that 90 point, where you're more comfortable to do things like cartwheel or aerial or GMS.
Or hooking it.
Or hooking, yeah, typically.
Yeah.
So, and that's usually where you'll find that. And another, because we were talking about target and Dom alignment and how that's optimal. If you think about tricks like box cutter, they'll land in that they'll land with their right leg facing that plus 90-degree point,
Yep.
and their left leg kicking at that 180 point, their target, which is also incidentally their dom.
Yeah.
Which is kind of the closer you get to a really good boxer is going to be hitting that point essentially.
It's so funny because for me personally, I have a lot of right ankle problems, so I'm really scared to land in that sprained ankle position, which is that 90-degree position. So whenever I do my box cutters, everyone can see if you slow down my fucking videos, I'm landing technically on the 0-degree position in the newbie fucking thing, but I'm hooking all the way out here and shit like that at 90 to 180 around there, probably more 45. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's I don't know. I'm really sketched out to land at that exactly 90 position because I've injured myself so many times. I've landed aerial in that position. Aerial is technically a hyper trick, by the way.
Right.
And we addressed that, I think, actually last episode. But yeah, so it's interesting to see these nuances, but it's still hyper. You know what I mean? In the end of it all that's what we're trying to get at.
Yeah.
And something just to clarify, because we're going to go so in depth with trick theory, I want to address some terminology that me and Jason have gotten accustomed to using, and I think is really descriptive of that 0 to 90 point is for example, if you land hyper in the 0 point, I would call that short hyper, and it's short because it's you just landed the shortest amount of hyper that you can,
right?
And then landing at 90, we've started calling it actually absolute hyper, and the reason why we called it absolute hyper is because, well, first of all, full hyper, what the fuck? We're not gonna call it full because full is already a thing.
Full already exists in the namespace.
Complete's already a thing.
Yeah.
We literally looked up a fucking source
to find an available word that wasn't already reserved by tricking.
Yeah, and I think absolute, as soon as we saw it, we're
that's the one. Absolute. Yeah. So absolute is the max amount of rotation you can hit on any given landing stance. So that's not to say we've already kind of hit on a lot, but the short hyper is still very much a valid hyper. It's just the fact that it's short.
Yeah.
And we'll also, when it comes to the next episode, when we talk about the single leg takeoffs and tricks like that and transitions, we'll kind of describe why these short and absolute positions have their place in the framework, because they're actually pretty important. But it's essentially like you said, just
it's
a good way to differentiate.
Exactly. It's you're not really going to use this outside of a trick theory setting. I'm not going to go to my homeboys yo, I just did short hyper fucking cork and it was fucking wild. You know what I mean? No one's going to say that, but it's more to differentiate within a trick theory stance. Oh, wait, what stance did you do that trick out of? It's oh, I did it from complete hyper. Or sorry, absolute hyper, I should say.
Yeah, no. Well, it more accurately describes the landing stance you've done it, because landing stances have those windows. And like I said, next episode we'll talk about single leg takeoffs where it's more relevant, especially relevant, but essentially it's just a way to further describe how you're doing a trick.
Yeah.
And it's totally optional.
Yeah, exactly. So you're going to see us use short and absolute for all these rest of this hyper stances and stuff, or sorry, for the rest of these stances. So just so you know exactly what that means.
Right.
So, another thing with hyper really quick that I want to address is that I feel hyper in the tricking community has sometimes been used as doing a trick and landing on the same leg.
Okay.
And so,
okay, so to say it's a variation and not a landing stance is another fallacy that's pretty common in tricking. Hyper full, right, is typically thought to be a variation of full, but... And this is kind of why we've grouped landing stances as modifiers, is because they're really close.
Yeah.
But they're not the same.
They're similar to variations.
Yeah, they're
right?
sorry. Landing stances and variations are modifiers in that they're super close, but they're just two different, because you can do a variation and still do a different landing stance.
Yes, exactly.
But, you were saying, though...
I've heard people use I said this in the last episode, hyper. You know what I mean? It's
right.
a hyper box cutter. You're essentially saying double hyper.
A trick that's already been hypered, landing hyper again. But we've, as we discussed last time.
When I hear someone say hyper box cutter, my gut reaction is they did mega, but I in the most trick theory sense, the most oh, I'm gonna be, super
anal about
like
it.
anal about it, like, oh, you did hyper box cutter, so you just did box cutter. It's understood that it's in hyper. You know?
Yeah.
It's like, so.
But that's because the box cutter transition lands in hyper intrinsically.
Yes, exactly. So, I mean, I guess this moves on to the next point, which is mega. Mega is a little bit of a weirder landing stance.
Hyper.
Hyper, as it's known in some circles. But basically, it's whenever you land a trick on your left. It literally in my notes, it's not hyper. But to describe it, it's basically when you land on your left leg from the 90-degree point to the 180-degree point. And the 180-degree point is when you're facing your dom, right? So you're facing forward, like your momentum's going forward. That is mega right there, right? So, I mean, you can do a few things from this. You can literally go into vanishes. That's the most typical use of it, I think.
was just thinking that.
Yeah, like people
vanish
doing...
side swipe or vanish snapu.
Yeah, like people who scissor and do like late nines, like that's a mega.
That
really
lands about in that range, yeah.
Exactly. So, yeah. Vanish.
Or if you're bad at late round like me and you landed that kind of 90 to 180 point, it still like counts, but it's just bad.
Right. So, yeah, exactly. So that's basically mega. And a really interesting thing about mega is it's also like the stance that, for example, Keenan Carr used to do his mega carts into A-twist. Right? So remember he would do mega, and it would almost look like a cart switch, but not quite because he wasn't landing complete. He was landing in a mega cart.
Right, 90 degrees more than complete.
Yeah, and then he'd go straight into an A-twist. So that's the mega landing. That's it's probably one of the funkier ones to get into because it's just like, who the fuck does that?
Well, and what's really interesting about the Keenan Carr takeoff for the mega cart is that it's short mega, and that's typically not where we want to be. And usually we'll see short mega in like the aerial family variations, where we'll see like short mega aerial to like rapid aerial or something, you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Or to B-twist. It's usually where you'll see the kind of short mega stuff.
Yeah, I agree. And then like absolute mega stuff would be like Vanish Rise, and technically you can front swing A-twist from absolute mega.
Right.
If you have your leg in front of you, basically. So that's something to keep in mind.
Right. A little bit harder to achieve, but still within the realm of possibility.
I feel like I've probably seen someone do that. I'm trying to think, but like I don't really know. I would love someone to do mega, like do a scissor and then front swing into A-twist.
Yeah.
That has to happen actually.
I hope so, and if it hasn't, it needs to be done.
And when I say swing, I don't mean what Keenan Carr did, because Keenan Carr did a rapid, and we'll get to that in the next episode. But basically, I want that leg to pass your other leg.
Right. I want a deliberate swing that is defined as such.
Right.
So I guess since we're talking about swings, this brings us to a good point into our next landing stance, which is semi. Semi is extremely popular these days, as it is the landing stance used for front swinging into rise tricks.
Yep.
However, as trick theorists, we should note that front swinging out of semi is not the only thing that you can do.
Yeah, of course.
Of course, you can vanish. But let's kind of, before I get ahead of myself, let me kind of break down exactly where semi sits. So semi lands on that right leg for left leg twisters, and for left.
Left
right?
side twisters.
Yes.
Yeah, you said it.
I thought I fucked up. I got it. All right, so it lands on the right leg for left side twisters, and it encompasses the 180 degree to 270 degree angle, or that portion there on the right leg. And so when we see the previously mentioned front swing from semi, it's usually short semi, where you're facing your dom entirely with your chest, and you swing that left leg past your right leg, and then perform a rise. So that's kind of like what we mean by that. And now, what's really interesting about semi is that the absolute semi position is typically an incidental landing stance.
Yeah, very few people do that.
Right.
On purpose.
On purpose.
But there's stuff you can do out of it. But we'll get to that.
Well, what's interesting is that stuff, the hyper stuff is usually with your dom, but the semi stuff doing it is against your dom, but vice versa for like the right leg stuff, the model side.
Right.
We'll talk about that. Okay.
All right, so be prepared.
So essentially, though, right, like as I was saying, that 720 right leg landing is typically incidental. 270, sorry. What did I say, 720?
720.
Yeah, fuck. And so 270, I'm bad at numbers, slightly what is that? What's the... I don't know.
So the absolute? Sure.
No, never mind. Doesn't matter.
Okay.
All right, so when you land at that 270 point, though, it, like I said, typically incidental. The clearest example, in my opinion, is of Kite's first hyper triple cork back in 2012 or 2013.
Quote unquote hyper triple cork.
Right. It was at that time. It was like extremely exciting, and everyone was hyped because, of course, hyper triple cork hadn't been done yet, and we wanted to see it done.
Right.
But what we didn't understand is that Kite actually landed a semi triple cork, which is that double cork plus 270 degrees of rotation on the right leg.
Yeah.
And then kind of trebled the last 180 degrees.
Yeah.
And it has this like illusion of hyper triple cork.
Yeah.
But like, and this is the perfect example of an incidental an incidental absolute semi landing.
The one that really sticks out in my mind was Bailey Payne doing quote unquote hyper wrap triple or whatever the fuck when he landed in semi. So basically he did a really shitty wrap triple basically. And then he like spun around and it was hyper. It was slow-mo and everything, which blew my mind. That
people accepted it at the slow-mo rate as hyper triple.
Yeah, people in the comments were like, dude, was that the world's first hyper wrap triple? And stuff like that. And he was like, yeah, dude. Like, he was like,
of course, if nothing else.
He was like, which, like, I mean, honestly.
If I was Bailey Payne landing, quote unquote, the world's first hyper wrap trip, I most certainly would have claimed that it was as well.
Yeah, it's impressive on its own, right? And also, like, Trick Theory was not as, like, I guess, heavy at that point. So, like, honestly, I don't really blame people for thinking that and shit like that. And it's fine, but we also have to call it what it is. Like, it was semi-wrap triple full. And
there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. In fact, the absolute semi position, the 270 position, which we'll talk about more in coming episodes, and this one, is, in my opinion, the hardest position to do anything with.
It's weird.
It really is. And it's like...
You can rapidize.
Right. And if you can land in this position and actively, like, use it to your advantage, then, like, you can come up with some really fresh, really unique combos. And I'm not talking, like, ooh-woo fresh, like... I'm not talking, like, what is it? The hand plant rise. Well, no, hand plant rise, that's fucking stum. Everyone's doing it. I can't think of what it's called.
Hand plant rise?
It's like...
Oh, broken.
No, not broken.
Oh, no.
It doesn't matter.
Reverse Al.
Reverse Al, yeah, exactly. It's like, ooh, like, reverse Al is like that trick that's like, super popular, and like, so cool. Oh, fresh, innovative, but like,
I like reverse Al personally, but
like, absolute semi is the real fresh.
Fun fact, reverse Al lands in Mega, so that's pretty cool.
Interesting.
Yeah,
you'll have to, I guess because it takes off from that hyper position, right?
Yeah, it takes off hyper, there's no twist, and you land on your left. So, but like 0 degrees of twist, not even like a rise degree of twist.
We'll have to talk about it outside of this episode.
But yeah, no, exactly. But so I think you probably noticed by now, but when we say semi, like when we're saying, for example, semi-triple cork, we're saying, it's a double cork plus 0.5 or 0.75, whatever the fuck it is. You know what I mean? And so, like, that's typically, or that used to be how semi was used, because it was like, semi is like almost this thing. You know what I mean?
Almost triple is the way you could literally read it out, like semi triple cork, almost triple cork, a double cork that landed an additional 270 or 180, whatever. It was almost triple cork. It's literally within the name in the English language.
Yeah, so that's traditionally how semi was used, and like there's been a big switch now, even with really big name trickers. Towels uses it.
Everyone uses it.
Pretty much everyone says semi, as if like when I say semi double cork, it's exactly what we were just talking about. It's double cork plus that 0.5 twist.
Right.
So like it's this weird quirk of language, and that's what people have been using lately and stuff like that, and I fucking hate all of it. Because honestly, I hate the subtractive nature of the first version, and I hate the second version because it's not descriptive. Because when I say semi, it sounds like it's like a little bit of, something.
Right.
You know what I mean? So, like, I don't know. Personally, to me, like, I want to start using some shit like ultra. Like, I think that would make so much more sense if we just said, like, you did ultra cork. Like,
Right.
I know for a fact you did a cork and you added some shit to it. Like, you know what I
Right.
mean? It's like...
Right, like, without a doubt, like, it was an ultra quirk, like, it was a beefed up quirk. And to be honest, I was kind of the opinion that changing that kind of stuff was, like, an area I didn't really want to go to, but in my own personal beliefs, I see the merit of the quote-unquote ultra landing.
Yeah.
And to kind of, like, clear up a little bit of what you were saying in regards to, like, subtractive language, is to say that semi is the only instance where this happens. And that's, like, where semi is subtractive, yet complete means full, and hyper means an additional, mega means an additional, but semi is the only one that has this minus point.
It's weird because that's
subtraction.
You have to have this predictive power with it, right? You have to know what could have been in order to subtract from it. Like, you know what I mean? So, like, let's say I did shuriken cutter and I landed in semi. What would you call that in the traditional semi language? It's like, I have to know what would have happened.
What comes above shuriken cutter.
Would I have added a round? Would I have added this thing? Would I have had, like, you don't really know. Like, what do I call that? Like, I don't even know what to call that.
Right. It really is just baffling. Well, and that's part of the problem. You know, a lot of it. And, like, additionally, there's, like, completely valid tricks, like you were saying, shuriken cutter. Or hyper hooks, right, that land in semi and are front swung, and there's no real accurate way to describe them with either form of the language. I mean, calling semi double in the fact that it's additive, so like it adds on to the base.
So saying ultra basically,
right? So using it in the ultra context is how I'm going to refer to it.
Yeah.
Like, you know, makes sense, but like the English like literal verbiage of it doesn't make sense. And a really, like, one example that really, like, hit home for me was something like Hyper 9 that lands in semi.
Yeah, that's something that confuses me, too.
Right, because, like, what is that? Is that, with the traditional understanding of semi, would that be semi 10, semi 12? Where exactly is that in regards to, you know, the kick?
I'd probably call that semi 9, because semi 9, ultra 9, let's say ultra.
With the ultra context.
Yeah. Let's say ultra 9. Because ultra 9 describes that I did a 9 kick, but after that kick, I didn't do anything else except for land an ultra. You know what I mean? It's like, it's right then and there, I'm good, ultra landing, that's it. You know what I mean? So I think that's a really good descriptor of that, personally.
Well, and that's, the Hyper 9 issue, as I like to refer to it with regards to semi, is
one of the hard problems of mathematics.
Yeah, it's like, it's the hard problem of semi, is Hyper 9, is like, what happens when you land a Hyper 9 in semi, what is that actually called besides semi 9 in the context of ultra? And that's why I think something like ultra makes a lot of sense. Even though I do not advocate for the changing of trick names.
This is the one.
Like this would be the one that I do, but I'm still also not hard advocating for it. So,
and we're definitely not the ones that came up with ultra. By the way, there's been a actually pretty good push for people to change semi to ultra for a while now, and I've seen many people talk about it. I've seen many blogs talk about it. There's this blog from the Washington State. I forgot what exactly they're called. I'll hit them up in the credits, but they talked about this subtractive nature of shit. They talked about ultra. They talked about all the shit that we're talking about right now, and it's a dope-ass article. You guys should check it out.
I actually want to read that if you could share.
Yeah, no, I'll send it to you. But yeah, basically, like, I'll hit it up in the credits. I'll put it in the show notes and shit like that. But ultra is not our creation. I want, like,
that to
just
be ironclad clear. Like, not come up with that. It's just a.
But I think it should be a thing.
Well, and to be honest, I think it does make sense with the proposed arguments I have. And of course, if you have any, reconciliations of the Hyper 9 issue with regard to semi, please do share, because I want to know what other people think about it.
Hyper 9.
Yeah, it really is like a legitimate issue.
Yeah.
Like the non-hooky version of kicks, like just the hyper version or the swipe version in theory. Landing in semi is a problem. And so another thing that I want to quickly touch up on is that, our framework isn't gospel, and I know that semi in particular is a very contentious topic. And when we start talking about landing stances and semi in particular, I've noticed that triggers get very defensive, kind of like apprehensive about accepting new concepts and new ideas. So I just want to say, you know, listen to the podcast with a grain of salt. You know, kind of keep an open mind.
Yeah.
You know, we're not asking you to change. We're just kind of giving you a new perspective to look at
Just
through.
chew on it. Just chew on it.
Right.
Like, literally
mull it
just
over.
that. Like,
And especially for new triggers, but for the season ones as well, like, you know, give the podcast a few listens, because, like, you know, we really have sat here and tried to, like, poke as many holes in this as possible.
We've tried to, like, tear this shit down.
Right.
Like, it's...
And I think a lot of it, like, a lot of arguments from other people will just be coming from their base understanding of the language that we use, like how we describe tricks or whatever. Like,
right.
You know, someone's idea of hyper may be our idea of, like, semi or something for whatever reason.
Right.
You know, but like that just comes down to, like, a difference in how we describe things, and we can reconcile that if you allow it.
Yeah.
I'm talking about a particular conversation.
I know.
But like, essentially though, like, what I'm trying to get at though is, like, you know, it's definitely, no one wants to be told the way that they view tricking is wrong, and that's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to share, you know,
a different way of viewing it that allows for more creativity. In my opinion, that's kind of what I'm viewing it as.
I see it too, and it still maintains the traditional tricker logic of, like, you know, not fucking with what's already established.
Yeah.
It doesn't really. I mean, aside from
I'm gonna
Ultra,
fuck with Semi. I'm sorry, but I'm gonna fuck with Semi.
Semi is just, and I think Semi is so contentious because it is so, like, just so weird.
Who the fuck came up with that shit?
Yeah.
Who?
Well, imagine what other landing stances really have these problems besides Semi.
CEO of Naming Tricks, step the fuck down now, please.
Yeah,
we need you out of there.
We are requesting your resignation.
You're really shitty at your job.
Yeah.
but all right, moving on. So last one is complete. So complete is landing on your left leg from 270 degrees to 0 degrees, which is, you know, when you land a fucking trick, like a regular ass fucking cork, right? So what we're trying to say with this 270 to 0 degrees is, like, it's this weird thing that most people don't think about. Most people think about complete as, like, okay, you landed 0 degrees and you're fucking
and that's
good.
it.
Yeah.
Right, you completed the trick, but
you have 9 degrees before that it technically counts. And so what we're trying to say by that is that there's some leeway in landing tricks. I think personally, if you land a trick that's 90 degrees off, that is a complete trick that it counts. You know what I mean?
Right. But, and so part of what's really interesting about, like, the human experience is that even if you mean something to not be harmful, if it uses perceived harmful language, it's still interpreted as harmful. Right. So, like, you land at that sub 90 degree mark on complete, right? Well,
short complete.
It's short complete, and that short complete feels almost like an attack.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, like, I think that short, like, works really well for that because, like, oh, Mike did definitely do the world's first complete cork. Short complete. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Someone's got to step up and finish that 90. I mean,
yeah, no, exactly. And short complete is valid as fuck. And,
right?
Like, I don't know.
But that's still, and exactly what you're saying. Like, we understand and recognize that short complete, slightly under rotated tricks are valid. And to be honest, like, I have a friend, Alex Solis, does full snap-boos on the ground, and he's almost always 90 degrees off, but it's never not impressive to see him do that.
Exactly.
I mean, like, it's always a banger.
Fucking full snap-boo.
Right, it's a full snap-boo.
I don't need to say complete because it's understood.
Right. Even if it is technically a little short. Like, but this... And it's this window of what I like to call window of opportunity, really, because it's not necessarily like a window, like a grace period. It's like where you can, like, do things or not do things. Right? Like, you have, like, this opportunity to like add more rotation to your typically short landed mega. Right. And so you have the opportunity to vanish more efficiently, or, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, you have. By allowing this, you have more opportunity to do things.
Yeah, no, I agree. I have a lot of leeway when it comes to tricks, to be honest. Like, if people do a backside 14 and it's, like, just a little bit slanted, I will count that. Like, in the same way, I'm, like, the same way with complete. And that being said, when we talk about these landing stances, we're talking about where your feet are. We're not talking about where your body is. So, like, what I optimally want for a short complete landing is, like, I don't give a fuck if your body is facing away from your DOM or to your DOM or whatever the fuck it is. It's where are your feet? You know what I mean? And so, like, you know, I know this has been a really contentious topic, is, like, Ashley Adams triple cork. Like, I'm sure you've heard of this. But, like, people are like, oh, like, it's not triple cork and shit like that. And, like, you know, I agree, it's not triple cork. And she never said it was triple cork. And
no.
I guess the person recording implied that it was triple cork by saying, like, I think that's it. But that's kind of human error. That's like, oh, you see it without slowing it down. You know what I mean? I don't think that's any fault by his part and shit like that.
And and what I think about specifically the Ashley Adams thing, one, that it's an incredible and, you know, overdue achievement for women.
It's a girl, like, so fucking close to triple cork. Holy shit.
I mean, that should be, that in its own right should be celebrated.
Yeah.
And for maybe another episode, Talking Tricks episode, that's a more casual, not so theory-based, is, like, Nike's missed opportunity with the first female triple cork.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, they could be really capitalizing on this.
You're not wrong.
Like, imagine all those, like, Serena Williams, like, tennis ads, but with Ashley Adams triple cork ads. Like, that would be hype. That would be hype. I would buy
that shit on Nikes.
Yes,
bro.
Fuck. I would literally buy all the Nike products.
Even if it's not triple cork. Like, okay, so, and that gets to what we're saying. So, like, if you look at the video, her torso is facing the 90-degree mark, or the 270-degree mark, I should say.
Yes.
But
sub 90-degree mark.
But her feet are absolutely at 180. You know what I mean? So, and therefore we don't count it as complete. Like, that's
not even in the short version, unfortunately. And that's not to discredit Ashley Adams in any way, shape, or form. I 100% believe she will be the first female triple cork unless someone, like, comes up out of nowhere and steals it.
Which we welcome.
Right, and I also, like, you know, I want Ashley Adams to be the, you know, to triple cork. Like, I mean, I have nothing against Ashley Adams whatsoever. So I just wanted to establish that because I know there's a little bit of, like, controversy around this topic.
It's weird. Well, people are blowing it up a lot.
Yeah.
It's like, she never claimed it was triple cork.
Right,
like,
people acting like...
People keep talking about these white knights that are, like, coming to her, like... To her to defend her and shit like that.
But, like, what is there to defend? The girl just posted a tricking clip.
I personally haven't seen it, and maybe there are them, but, like, either way, I'm like, I don't give a fuck. Like,
I mean, yeah, it was honestly, it's not just a huge accomplishment for tricking or for women. I mean, it's just a great milestone overall.
Yeah, no, it's cool as fuck. So it makes a difference. Like, I mean, women's bodies are just designed very differently, so it's like, of course, they're going to have slightly different biomechanics, and shit's going to be, like, especially tricking, for example, is going to be, like, a little harder for them. So, commend that.
A sport as tricking, like, as biomechanically dependent as tricking.
Yeah, exactly. So, highly commend that. But to get back to complete, so that's
sorry for that short tangent.
Yeah, well, this is the type of stuff I want to talk about on Talking Tricks, though.
Of course.
But the 270 to 0-degree mark also leaves some leeway for where your kick is. And this is where we're coming at when we say that your target has 90 degrees of leeway. Right? So, Jason says that the optimal target is at, you know, facing your DOM, right? So, but a lot of people think that it's 90 degrees off. But because complete lands in that 90-degree spot, you can tornado kick, land in short complete, and kick, you know, 90 degrees off of your DOM, or you can tornado kick, land complete, like absolute complete.
Right, and move forward out of your tornado, and as opposed to sideways out of your tornado.
And that's kicking towards your DOM. So it gives us 90-degree leeway with where your target is, and that gives you, like, a perfect opportunity to say, like, yeah, like a hook kick or a tornado or a round kick done in any of these spots is on target, and that's it. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, that's something that I feel like not a lot of people have considered, and I think it's cool as shit. Because, like, when people
like, choose a target, and it's like, if I don't hit it that specific spot, then it's not what I need it to be. But it's like, well, if you look at it, it's more of, like, a range, like, in between these 2 points. Like, if you kick in there, like, you're golden. And that also, like, eliminates a lot of the stress of hitting some exact specific spot.
Yeah, and there is something to be said about people who can hit an exact target, because, like, obviously that's cool as fuck, but also, like, I think that kicks have, like, a tail to them, like, you know what I mean? Is like your kick doesn't exist at one point in space. It like drags on, you know what I mean?
It kicks across a point.
Exactly. So there's not just like one point where you're kicking. It's like you're kicking across a few different points in infinite space and shit like that.
Right.
So yeah, of course there's gonna be this 90-degree mark where it's like your target is valid no matter what.
And I think and it's like, and if complete or kicks, I mean, kicks getting this 90-degree leeway is like is like an effect of landing stances getting this 90-degree leeway. But like in the fact that complete gets it, like if complete gets it, all the other ones have to get it.
Yeah.
You know, and it actually, and when all the other ones get it, it forms a fully formed picture of where you can land and how you can land.
It comes together really beautifully is what we're trying to say.
Right. It fully completes the picture. It encompasses the entire aspect of where you could land within another trick.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's pretty much complete, but something I do want to hit on really quick is fake landings. So you probably heard of fake landings before, and it's basically the reasoning that people, you know, who believe in fake landings basically give is like, you typically will do like a front swing out of semi, right? So let's say you land hyper, it's also a right leg landing trick, and you will front swing out of it. So it's like you're semiing, but not really because you landed short. So it's like a fake semi. You know what I mean? Like,
but you still do the semi-like stuff you would do out of semi, but out of hyper. So fake.
Yeah, so like I don't really, I mean, as you can tell probably already, we're not big components of the fake landing stances because I think you can land in any landing stance and do any trick out of it, like, or any trick on that foot out of it, you know what I mean? Is like you're landing on your right leg, it doesn't matter if you land in hyper or semi, you can front swing rise out of it. Like, I don't really care. Like, I get how there's a differentiation between it because it's like one of them has your foot in front, one of them has your foot in back, depending on what you're talking about. But like, I think that's understood when you say I did hyper front swing rise. You know what I mean?
Right. So, or like hyper full front swing rise, because hyper swing rise would be kind of
yeah, exactly. There's a trick attached to that and stuff like that. And this exists technically for every other landing stance, so you can fake complete, which is like a mega landing, but you did swing cork or something like that.
Right.
So that's like the mega version of it, and that's weird as fuck to do, but like it can be done.
But it's still done. I mean, it's still possible, and so I guess that really hits home on like the like, is fake necessary? And I guess at the end of the day, it's not. If you don't account for like your leg positioning with your landing stance, because like if the landing stance is strictly limited to the one or two technically legs that touches the floor, then like and it has no attention to like the leg that's not touching the floor, then
like
that allows,
whether it's in front or in back,
that allows for you, like that ambiguity allows for you to theoretically perform any left leg only takeoff tricks from something like mega or complete. And same thing with hyper. If you only land on that right leg and do not assume a positioning like flamingo or eagle, right? Like, I mean, flamingo is just a way to describe like the front swing positioning. But like if you don't assume that, if you only look at the way the right foot touches and like its degrees and relative to like the base trick, then like the variations, or I'm sorry, the transitions and the tricks that you can do out of it, are just unlimited. It's not just front swing from semi. It's you can vanish, you can reversal, you can all of the single leg takeoffs from semi, all of the single leg takeoffs from complete, and this for every landing stance.
I feel like it's just a way of limiting exactly what you can do, because like you have to split into two different categories, like, okay, this is done from fake semi and this is done from hyper and shit like that, but you also have to do the mental gymnastics to figure that out. Like, you have to say like, okay, wait, this is not a trick that's done from this landing stance typically, so I need to name it this.
You have to go back and edit the combo a bit to change, like, oh, that wasn't semi, that was actually fake hyper. Which is dumb.
A really good example of the fake landings, for example, is like Tiki recently did a clip where he did double 7, but the double 7 wasn't landed at semi, it was landed in hyper, and he front swung, so he changed his DOM, right?
Right.
But I would just call that double 7 landed in hyper, and then he front swung into rise. And that tells you all you need to know. Because you know that he's landing in hyper, and because you know he's front swinging, you know that he's changing his momentum. And that's it. Like, you know,
right, like that encompasses all of the actions that occur within that specific frame of time. And so, like, that's kind of like what I'm saying. Like, the landing stances that we provide, short to absolute in that window, like, allow for us to not have to use additional naming for, like, these transitions. It can literally just be hyper, front swing, rise. And it's understood that changes your DOM. Now, oftentimes when we present the framework, we present the ideal that you will be traveling with your DOM, but our framework still recognizes the fact that you could either go in the opposite direction of your DOM. So the most clear example of this would be Tiki's hyper to front swing rise, right? But but what if he landed in short hyper and did like GMS, and so then his DOM would then go from backward to like sideways
to the left,
right. It would be perpendicular 90 degrees off of where it was, and like I said, if you're not assuming the swing or non-landing leg position of these single leg landings, then that leaves open a lot of room to what you can do off of that landing position.
There's just infinitely more creative shit you can do with it, and also like fake, like you said, doesn't account for that. Like, what would you call short hyper landing GMS? Because like there's no fake counterpoint.
It'd be like I don't even want to try to imagine what it would
exactly. It's just like I said, a lot of mental gymnastics. I'm not really a big component on it. I mean, I guess you could be. You could say it. I don't really give a fuck and stuff like that. But I'm probably just gonna say you landed in hyper and then you front swung, or you landed in mega and then you back swung. Like, you know what I mean? Is like I'm not really super big on.
And like the fake thing just kind of makes it complicated. Like it's fake. The opposite of semi, right, would be hyper in the fake context. But like hyper already exists, so why not use it?
So that's kind of our argument against it. Tell us if you think we're dumb or not. I don't really care. Like, honestly, you could use whichever like
is most we're just trying to provide a different way to look at tricking besides the mainstream, like what's typically assumed. And
I just feel like it's redundant, you know.
Right.
But I guess to move on past this, what would you say like landing on two legs means? You know what I mean? Because like we need landing stances for two legs,
right?
And obviously, like for me, if you land on two legs and you finished a cork, like that's complete to me. Like that's a complete cork,
right? And that's like the typical way you would imagine a completed twist to land is without variation. A completed twist is imagined to land both feet at the same time simultaneously.
Right.
So like if you were to land 2 feet at any given position, I typically round down. So
hyper for outside of 90?
Yeah, so like outside of like complete, obviously if you complete the trick, you've completed the trick. So
even at 270.
Well, okay,
that's the exception,
so at 270, I actually consider that semi. So, but I'll explain. So like at the 0 position, if you land with both feet, you've landed complete.
Yeah.
If you land at the 90 position with both feet, it's
hyper.
I would say that's hyper. And if you land at mega with the 2 feet, I would say that's mega.
Yeah.
And then so logically following that to semi, if you land with both feet, you'd be in semi and not complete. And like I know it's kind of weird because we said like if the left foot lands first, it would be short complete.
Yeah.
But just because of the way that we've rounded down in the past, it makes sense to kind of like hit that there.
Yeah, I agree. In the most trick theory sense, I think your framework makes most sense. But then I think in the most practical sense, even if people are landing 2 feet at 270, most likely they're going to land left foot a little bit
left,
more.
left 10.3005 seconds.
Yeah,
right.
just a few seconds more.
No, I get it. And like that's where part of the framework is understanding the limits of theory and practicality.
Yeah. And how they mix together and shit.
Right, and how you can use them to, like we said, just expand your combos, your tricking vocabulary, your library, what's available to you.
Yeah. And I've also heard, for example, if you land in what you called mega with 2 feet, I've heard that called turbo before if you like hook it. Like
right. Yeah,
like shuriken
a box cutter or a shuriken cutter landed with both feet at the same time would be turbo. Like and that's fair. And it could be called a different landing stance. Yeah. I'm not opposed to something like that. It's not something that I'm gonna come up with and try to push personally, but it's something that if it makes sense and it's reasonable, I would agree to it.
I want to make it aware that that's what a lot of the tricking community thinks and stuff like that. And like honestly, I'm not opposed to it either. Like
Right.
turbo
or mega for a unified mega landing or semi landing makes total sense for me. I mean, I'll accept either of those terms.
So there might be 5 landing stances. We don't know. But yeah,
technically 8 for the single leg versus the unified.
Oh god, yeah.
Well, we'll get into that
we call it
later.
the same shit. But but yeah, I mean that's pretty much landing stances. I think. Do you have anything else to add?
Without getting too close into the single leg takeoff stuff, I really do think that covers just about everything that we can do with landing stances.
Yeah, it'll make more sense when we get to transitions in the next episode. Like,
what was really interesting to me is I discussed landing stances with another mainstream tricker, and they thought that I was breaking down tricking too far.
Yeah.
That like, oh, you went past 180, or you went below 180, like you examined something at the 90-degree angle.
Yeah.
Like, why would you do that? That's a waste of time. But to be honest, like, I really disagree.
Yeah.
Like, I think that breaking down something as far as you can to like you literally can't anymore is the way to truly understand something, and then you build it back up.
Yeah. And like I agree. I think there's like some kind of reconciliation between theory and practice in that like obviously we're not going to name every fucking angle within that like 360 degree mark of landing stances. We're not going to give a separate name for all 360 degrees.
And because
you know what I mean?
in actuality, if we were to, it would be infinite.
Yeah.
And it would be impossible, impractical, and we couldn't expect anyone to understand that. So,
but there's a middle ground between them. Yeah. There's a middle ground between like, okay, naming every single fucking angle and naming like
4 primary ones.
Like every like just you only have 2. You can only land like towards your DOM or away from your DOM, and that's it. Like, you know what I mean? It's like
and then
like that.
And then from that on each other foot, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. So I agree with you. I think there's a middle point where there's just like, yeah, I want to talk about short and absolute hyper and short and absolute mega because that like strengthens a little bit more of what we're gonna do. Yeah, maybe in practical talk, I'm not gonna say short mega,
right?
But like that will the concept of short and absolute helps you understand a little bit more about what we talk about in the transitions episode, and you will understand once you get to it. And
it's literally next week. So next week when we talk about single leg stuff, it will all make a lot more sense. Hopefully, if provided we describe it accurately, which I think we will.
Yeah.
But of course, there's always a visual show notes in the comments and the description below.
Check it out.
Yep.
Exactly.
TalkingTricks.com for all of your diagrams, all of your visual aids for our auditory discussions.
Yep.
On a physical topic.
Yep. And to give credit to everyone who made this possible, thank you to Stephen French for making the logo. You're fucking awesome.
Alex Hunter for our TD Rise model.
Yep, exactly. He's the outline of it. And thank you to Steven Rogers for our intro song. So,
seriously, guys, thank you so much. Tricking and to the tricking community. This podcast would not be the same without you guys.
Exactly. Thank you so much. All right. I'll see you guys next week. Bye.